From Camp David during a snowy Christmas trip. The president, his wife Margaret, and their son Connor are getting ready to go to a fundraiser. Secret Service agent Mike Benning is a member of the president's security team as well. In addition to getting along well with the family and sparring with Benjamin in a closed-door boxing ring, Benning also assists Margaret in selecting her jewelry and gets along well with Connor, to whom Mike has been imparting advice on how to be a successful agent. The snow outside starts to fall harder as the group departs the camp for the fundraiser. Connor is traveling in an SUV with Mike while Ben and Margaret are in the presidential limo. The lead vehicle in the convoy strikes a deer as they approach a bridge across a river close to the camp, starting a cascade of carnage. One Secret Service SUV rams into the water below after crashing through the side of the bridge. In the end, the presidential limo skids close to the cliff while dangerously balancing. While Ben and Margaret are being rescued by Mike and several other agents, Margaret's door is stuck, and the limo is still falling off the cliff. Several agents try to prevent the car from overturning, but as they fail, Mike makes a split-second decision to free Ben from his seatbelt, saving him. However, Mike is unable to save Margaret, who drives the limo over the cliff. 18 months later, still angry about the Camp David event, Mike has since accepted a desk job with the US Treasury. When his girlfriend tries to explain things to him, he finds it difficult to focus and says they should watch a movie later that evening. Mike talks with Lynn Jacobs, director of the Secret Service, who is aware of his ongoing disappointment about his failure to save the First Lady. While Benning and Lynn are talking, they are interrupted by a group of Secret Service agents led by a man named Roma. Even though Benning was no longer a Secret Service agent, they seemed very friendly and respectful to him. Benning expressed deep regret over the incident that killed the First Lady after Roma and the others had left. Meanwhile, President Asher was seen chatting with Connor in his room as he prepared to meet with other state officials at the White House. South Korean Prime Minister Lee Tae-woo wanted to issue a statement with the President of the United States to denounce North Korea's military action to persuade them to withdraw from the border and cease missile tests, according to White House spokesman Alan Trumbull, who was present at the meeting. If the president granted the South Korean Prime Minister's request, according to Defense Secretary Ruth McMillan, it would also be a sign that the US was pressuring North Korea. When President Asher asked Charlie Rodriguez, his deputy, he found that he agreed with the Minister of Defense. When the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of South Korea were finally scheduled to meet at the White House, Lee Tae-woo introduced his personal bodyguard, Park, to the White House security personnel. On the other side, an unidentified aircraft illegally entered American airspace. Instead of communicating with him, American fighter jets attacked the fighter jet and flew toward the White House. Agent Roma acted swiftly after becoming aware of the airstrike by securing President Asher and other vital figures into the underground bunker. The White House's whole security was preparing to repel the attack. Soon after, the aircraft that had targeted the US fighter jets was spotted flying low over the Washington, D.C. area and carrying out airstrikes on terrified civilians who were scurrying for cover. While in his office, Benning noticed the ruckus at the White House and hurried over to it. Although US Air Force personnel were successful in shooting down the plane, things were not yet over. Benning soon became aware of mercenaries attacking on the ground while posing as civilians. The majority of the White House defensive soldiers were slain when they stormed the building. Unexpectedly, Park and his men attacked the president's guards with the aid of the defected Dave Forbes during a significant battle between the mercenaries and the White House Defense Forces in front of the White House. Before being killed, Roma called Lynn during the attack and announced that Olympus has fallen. The attackers then kidnapped President Asher and all present state leaders. A cell of North Korean terrorists going by the name Koreans for United Freedom plotted every attack outside and within the White House, KUF. After the terrorists had taken over and killed all of the White House security personnel, Benning was able to finally enter the White House. Then Park instructed his man Lim, a technical expert, to fly drones over the US Armed Forces movements and destroy the White House's defense and armament systems. Following that, the terrorists made a video call to the Pentagon and immediately assassinated Prime Minister Lee Tae-woo. President Asher and all the other senior leaders are being held captive, according to Park, who then appears on the TV. Park then requested that the Pentagon remove the soldiers stationed in front of the White House as a security. Park wanted President Asher to stay safe, so the Pentagon's leadership was forced to accede to his request. The terrorists ultimately had complete control of the White House and removed the American flag after the entire US military force withdrew. The interim president's replacement, Alan Trumbull, is now in communication with Lynn in the emergency briefing room at the Pentagon after Benning manages to kill numerous terrorists, disable internal surveillance, and gain access to President Asher's satellite earbuds. The president and other government representatives are being held hostage in the bunker, and Lynn then tells Banning that his son, Connor, has not been located. Park phoned the Pentagon once more, using President Asher's prisoner status as leverage to persuade Trumbull to remove the 7th Fleet and American forces from the Korean Peninsula and end American resistance to a new Korean War. If Trumbull refuses, Park threatens to execute the officials one at a time. But in truth, Park wants to avenge the passing of his mother by exploding America's nuclear arsenal and turning it into a radioactive wasteland. President Asher, Secretary of Defense Ruth McMillan, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Admiral Joseph Hoenig, who are all on the ground in bunkers, are the only people who know the access code to the Cerberus system, a secret protocol for managing all of the United States nuclear weapons. Park needs this code in order to carry out his plan. McMillan and Hoenig are obliged to follow President Asher's instructions after he commands them to expose their code in order to preserve their lives. On the other side, Banning receives information on the terrorists' desires as well as the first Cerberus code to be entered from the Pentagon. Once the terrorists discover Connor, they will undoubtedly use him to pressure President Asher into disclosing his Cerberus code, so Trumbull instructs Banning to save Connor and get the boy out of the White House before they do. Lim observed Connor's actions within the bunker while looking through the security footage. Then Park tells some of his men to murder Banning. Banning searched room after room in the White House until he discovered Connor hiding behind the walls and smuggling the boy to safety. The American military troops guarding the White House then came to the boy's rescue. After removing Connor from the White House, Banning kills a number of terrorists and gets information from them that indicates to them that the terrorist group's head is a guy by the name of Kang Yonsak, who is actually Park in disguise. Additionally, Banning provided the Pentagon with the data. One of the most deadly and sought-after terrorists in the world is Park, also known as Kang Yonsak. Since it is well known that a landmine owned by the US was the cause of his mother's death, Kang also wants to exact retribution on the US for the death of his mother. Park tries to coerce the Secretary of Defense into telling him the Cerberus code inside the bunker, but she refuses. Prior to President Asher ultimately ordering McMillan to give his Cerberus code because he could not stand to see the woman being mercilessly tortured, Park also subjected McMillan to torture. Finally, the defense minister told the president the Cerberus code as instructed by the president. Banning meets Forbes after killing numerous terrorists while conducting his surveillance. Forbes initially feigned that he still supported the United States. But as soon as Banning hears Park's real identity, he understands Forbes is collaborating with terrorists. Before Forbes killed himself, Banning attacked him. As a result, Forbes was forced to lie by telling Park that he had killed Banning. The Pentagon's defenses are incredibly vulnerable to airstrikes since there aren't many terrorists on the rooftops, according to Army Chief of Staff General Edward Clegg. Then, Edward persuades Trumbull to authorize a SEAL team to conduct an airstrike on the White House in an effort to retake it from the terrorists. Before the Pentagon launched an airstrike, Banning told them to wait while he went to the rooftop to survey the situation there. Trumbull, who was impatient, disregarded Banning's advice and promptly gave the SEALs permission to attack the White House with an airstrike. Unbeknownst to the Pentagon, Park and his team have discovered their strategy thanks to the drones they previously flew. The highly sophisticated Hydra 6 anti-aircraft system was turned on by Park as the SEAL team was getting ready to launch an attack at the White House. This quickly brought down all of the SEAL team's helicopters. Trumbull cancels the mission right away, and Banning succeeds in detonating the Hydra 6, but not before being knocked to the ground from a height to prevent the chopper from losing control and heading straight for the White House's roof. In retaliation for the attack on the Pentagon, Park executed Vice President Charlie Rodriguez and threatened to assassinate President Asher right away if Trumbull disobeyed. After that, Park requested a helicopter with a full tank of fuel so he could leave the area. When Trumbull phones Banning, he tells him that they have 30 minutes left before Park gets what he wants and begs him to act quickly to save President Asher. Then, Banning vowed to kill Park over the phone. Park attempts to execute McMillan outside the White House in full view of the media, despite knowing that Banning is still alive. However, Banning reacted quickly and attacked Park and his men, forcing them to retreat into the bunker until McMillan was eventually rescued by American soldiers. Given the short amount of time left, Trumbull promptly issued orders ordering the 7th Fleet and all American forces out of military-free zones around the world as well as bringing helicopters to the White House grounds. Park attempts to fake his and President Asher's deaths by sacrificing some of his remaining soldiers as well as the remaining prisoners since his number of soldiers is dropping. When everyone was on board, they were disguised as American soldiers by wearing similar clothing and masks. All of the people on board were killed when the chopper suddenly exploded. Banning, who wasn't duped by Park's deception, was the only person who didn't believe President Asher was dead. The individual was adamant that Park and President Asher were both still alive and safe in the bunker. Insisting that Park and President Asher were still inside, Benning then informed the Pentagon that he was heading to the bunker. With 2 Cerberus codes in his possession, Park uses a brute force attack to activate the biggest nuclear control system in the US in order to eventually obtain President Asher's Cerberus code. Due to the impending nuclear catastrophe, hundreds of millions of Americans would die and the US will turn into a desolate and chilly nation. Benning ambushes Park's remaining soldiers as soon as they attempt to flee and ends their lives, all but Park. President Asher is shot by Park during the ambush, but, before Benning pursues Park and starts a hand-to-hand fight with him. President Asher, spotting a tiny opening, briefly diverts Park so that Benning can execute him. Benning quickly approached the president and attempted to stem the bleeding in his stomach in an effort to preserve his life after killing Park and all of his terrorist children. Then, President Asher informed Benning of Cerberus and requested that he turn it off right now. Benning was finally able to deactivate Cerberus and stop a nuclear catastrophe from devastating the United States with the aid of Trumbull and his team. Asher was then taken outside the White House by Benning so that he might obtain medical attention. The success of Benning in saving the president and the United States from destruction was applauded by everyone in the Pentagon, who appeared relieved. Outside the White House, President Asher and his son Connor are at last reunited. While fighting the terrorists by himself, Benning was waiting for his wife Leah, who appeared to be quite concerned for his safety. The attack is discussed in the film's final scene, and President Asher promises that the United States would soon recover and emerge stronger. Following that, Mike Benning was appointed again to lead the president's security team, and President Asher sincerely thanked Benning for rescuing both his life and the country from oblivion.